Let's talk about backwards aerial inverts. I've had some requests for this one, being able to invert on spinning pole, but going backwards. Okay, so we've gone over before inverting in a spinning chopper going forwards, but some people prefer to invert backwards or they just want to change it up and have a little variation. Okay, so the backwards aerial invert is when I'm going to be rolling in the direction of the spin to go back, like this. So first and foremost, this may seem straightforward, but maybe not, is you want to make sure that you are rolling backwards into the spin, okay? So if I'm spinning clockwise, I want to invert backwards on my left side. Likewise, if you're spinning counterclockwise, you want to invert backwards on your right side, okay? So when you go into the invert, you want your head to be pointing in the direction of the spin. Okay, so first and foremost on this, I would say, is just being comfortable with spinning pole in general. Oftentimes, people are not 100% comfortable with the spin to begin with, and so they're actually fighting the spin. So with this invert, same as with the spinning chopper, also with this backwards aerial invert, if you learn to harness the spin, it will work in your favor. You can use it for good instead of evil. So with this one, you can work on it from the ground initially, and then it's the same concept as up high. Okay, so when I go back into it, I want to think, if I'm going to invert on my left side, if I'm from a climb or a sit, my right hand is high. Okay, so if I'm going to invert left, right hand is high. My left hand's going to grab. How close together your hands are is up to you. Oftentimes I'll start with my hand high, but then as I spin backwards, I'll slide this one down to meet it. Okay, because if this hand is super high, you're not going to be able to tip your head back. Okay, so keep that in mind. Oftentimes people feel more comfortable with the hand high, but then they struggle with getting their butt up. Really difficult to lift your butt if you're not dropping your head. Okay, so especially with this backward spin, with all inverts, but especially with this one, if you don't drop your head, the spin is going to drag your butt down. Okay, so having the hands close together, whether they start that way or whether one raises up, the other one comes down, but bringing them closer together. Then the other thing is when you go into this, it's not a rotate backwards, stop, and then invert. The rotating backwards actually helps the invert. Okay, think about like a boomerang or whipping around. You're harnessing that centripetal force and you're using it to levitate your ass. Okay, so as I go into this, you can start even just from the ground. Think of you're going to pivot on that inside foot. As I turn backwards, I want it to all happen at once. As soon as this hip that is now an inside hip becomes an outside hip, I want to continue to roll and my head is going to tip back. So the motion is back, head goes, leg goes up. Okay? And it all has to happen at once. Oftentimes when people are kind of still figuring out the motion of it, they'll roll backwards, pause, and then try and invert, which basically means you put the brakes on and then you're trying to start again. Okay? Which is going to take more strength, more energy, more effort, more everything. Okay? So instead, continue it together. If this is a new motion for you, work on that rotation from the ground so you can start to tie it together before you take it aerially, okay? So A, height of the hands. B, using the rotation of this roll as part of your invert instead of two separate moves. And then the last little part is the rotation of how everything goes, okay? So as I roll backwards, I want to think about spiraling, which is kind of a confusing concept sometimes, especially if you're thinking about so many other things at once. So as I roll, I want to think I come towards the pole and then I start to roll slightly away from the pole. Okay, so there's kind of a spiral effect of it. You can keep your inside leg bent. You can keep your outside leg bent. Personally, I think that it's actually easier to keep the outside leg straight and the inside one bent because you'll feel this pivot of your inside leg on the pole and it gives you a little contact to kind of keep your butt in place while you drop your head. So I like having, if anything, the outside leg straight and the inside one bent, but that's also personal preference. You're going to see what works best for you. You can do this with both legs bent, both legs straight, stylize it however you want. But the biggest thing is getting your head and your butt to work in unison, okay? So as your head drops, butt coming up, okay? So let's look at it from a climb, okay? We'll just go one baby climb up, okay? Remember how I talked about the hands coming together. So if I start with my right hand high, as I go into the climb, I'm going to move this one up, I'm going to roll back, okay? So as I open, this is the part that kind of gets into like a whole other level of being able to multitask, is I start from here. I don't just go to here, like a complete 180. I think 180 and then continue to start to roll slightly. And it's that sort of peeling away that helps me get that outside hip to roll up. And that's the part that really harnesses into the centripetal force and whips you up, okay? So for the backwards spinning aerial invert, A, height of your hands, okay? Coming closer together so it's easier to drop your head and lift your butt. B, use this spin. You can go from a sit, you can go from a climb, you can go from the floor, but as soon as you start transitioning from this to the 180, it should be nonstop, okay? Instead of rotate and then try and invert, okay? Because then the spin is not helping. If anything, it's pulling your ass down, okay? So all at once, rotate, head back, go, okay? Third thing is don't stop at 180. Oftentimes we get kind of used to, like, if we initially learned how to invert in a very static or linear plane, we're used to just up and down. Instead, think about kind of rolling slightly away, and it's ever so slight, okay? So think it's ever so slight. There's the tendency is we get here and we get stuck. So it's sort of like a whoop, or you think of this outside leg as it opens, it kind of goes like a sunrise, sunset. Okay, so let's just look at it from a couple of different angles. We talked about where it is from the ground, which is a good place to start. Think about it as if you're going to do like a back hook spin or something. Inside hand starts high, outside foot plants. I'm going to pivot backwards as this hand grabs, and then when I go to invert, my hands are going to slide. So I'm going to roll, head goes back. Okay. If I take it from a climb, same thing. If I'm going from the climb, the second I decide that I'm going to commit into that backwards, it continues, okay? So single climb, hands come together, roll, keep rolling backwards to wherever you're gonna go with it, okay? Same, let's look at it from a spin, okay? Or I'm sorry, not from a spin, from a sit. So if I go pull sit, if I'm gonna invert backwards, as soon as this leg opens, and from a sit, I would say is definitely harder than from a climb, okay? So from here, because I don't get that full 180, it's like a, I don't know, 90, I'm gonna roll and then back, okay? So I would encourage you to start A, from the floor, B, from the climb, and then C, from the sit. Because like I said, the sit, we start here and we don't have as much of a rotation as a wind up, versus from a climb, I can kind of roll a little bit more, and that roll rotation is gonna help build the centripetal force to help assist in your invert, okay? So aerial, spinning, backwards, invert. If I'm spinning this direction, I'm going to invert backwards on my left. If I'm spinning this direction, I'm going to spin backwards on my right, okay? Start from the floor, make it a continuous motion. Make sure either your bottom hand is sliding up or your top hand is sliding down. They might not be touching, but close together. You don't want them to end up way up here, okay? Second, continuous motion. And then third, that last little bit is really think about around and open, ever so slightly. All right, try it out. Work through the progressions, both sides, of course, even if one side is only ready for the lower progression, but the other side's ready for prime time up high aerially. Questions? Let me know. Enjoy.